Moving along, it is my pleasure to welcome Mendy. Where did he go? Oh, there he is. Mendy to the stage. If you don't know who Mendy is by now, I don't know what's the matter, but he is the SVP of Revenue for Protege, and he's going to kick us off with another first here at SampleCon. Thanks, Mendy.
Thank you. So just a comment before we jump in. You know, Jacqueline in her opening remarks alluded to, you know, an accident that she had, and it was a rough year for her. You know, many people obviously were involved in putting together this conference, but that's difficult, and obviously, you know, health-wise. And she was, look at her, you know, all in, and all the effort she put in during a difficult time. So I think not leaving anybody out, but I think it's important to give a shout out to Jacqueline. So, we got good news and bad news. We're going there again. Bonnie, which one first? All right, bad news it is. We're going to go bad news. So the bad news is, at these conferences, events, and forums, we are still talking about and asking questions about what is, I don't think it came up this year, but last year, what is IR? What does it mean? That was one of the hot items last year, right? But we had this year, what does quality even mean? What does transparency even mean? What are all these things? And so it's kind of the bad news. The good news, though, is that we're still asking the same questions. And, you know, this industry didn't give up. We're going for it. And these things are not solved, obviously, overnight. I think, you know, I had some conversations with folks by dinner last night or happy hour, and like, I think some people think this is the only industry that has challenges. Go anywhere, any industry, advertising, wherever you want to go. There's no industry that doesn't have challenges, and this industry, I think, is, you know, people think we're way behind. I think we're ahead. I think we're ahead. We all work together, and we all know what we want to do. That's the first part of solving a problem. So last year, we did something at SampleCon. How many of you were here last year and participated in the collaboration labs? Okay, so not too many. So I'll give a little background on that briefly. So last year, I think one of the highlights, because we got a lot of feedback last year about it, one of the highlights was this concept of collaboration labs. Basically, we split the attendees into groups, into like smaller, let's use the word community, kind of small little communities, got into some rooms to talk about those very items that I just mentioned before, right? Definitions, quality, transparency. And it allowed everybody to really have you know, even though now we obviously encourage people to ask questions or voice their opinion from the audience, but obviously in that type of environment, it's a little easier, people get a little more time, and it was very successful, lots of positive feedback. But of course, the questions started coming in immediately. Oh, so what did you accomplish? Right? Are you guys really going to do something about it? What's going on? Where's the paper? All these questions start coming in like, where is it? And I heard this from one of my mentors, that we live in a microwave generation, right? We're in the generation of a microwave. We want it fast and we want it hot, right? This thing is not happening too fast. It's not an overnight thing that you wake up and we're going to solve all the problems. It's a process that takes time. So bear with us as we go through this. So just an update, and these gentlemen over here will come up in a minute and provide, you know, further feedback. But basically, just to answer the questions regarding what did we accomplish. So after SampleCon last year, we approached CASRO, and, you know, there were topics like we just mentioned that needed to get addressed. And, you know, at SampleCon, we always feel the conference is a forum for discussion. SampleCon is not trying to create a new we're not trying to create industry standards and protocols, and that's not on us. We're here to address some issues, talk about them, and bring it to the right folks that know how to deal with it and could deal with it. And therefore, we decided to partner and transition to CASRO to tackle some of these items, to address some of these items, and they're going to come up and give us an update as to what's going on over there. So let's go for it. Let us welcome up Peter Milla with CASRO. John Bremer, NPD. I think he just arrived, right, John?
I did.
Yeah. And Oscar Carlsson with Cint. The one, I got a question for Oscar, and then I'm off the stage. Okay, so obviously tackling these issues, there's lots of meetings and phone calls. Why do the calls got to be so early? I'm a millennial. I like to sleep. I can't handle it. Anyway, take it away. Thank you very much.
All right, so John, you want to go first?
Depends on where they have on our slides.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Okay. All right.
Apparently Oscar's going first.
Apparently me.
First, yeah. Here you go, Oscar. You have
Thank
you
you.
can do it from here if you want to be really comfortable, or you can do it from there.
Yeah,
I
I like
do-
the comfortable part.
Actually, can we actually ask if it actually does make sense if I go first, because I have an overview
Sure.
of everything as well. Is there any way of fast forwarding to my slides? John Bremer.
You can flip them there, yeah.
No. There is a way of fast forwarding to my slides.
Self-service, John.
Don't show them my slides now.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it going? Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. We got some action there.
This is going to be interesting. Let's go.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
I'm not a millennial, so apparently this doesn't work very well with me.
That's right.
Okay. Close your eyes so you don't see Oscar's stuff.
Yep.
Okay. Huh?
Okay.
Okay, so let me actually give you guys some background. I think Mendy did a good job, but with the good work that was done here at SampleCon last year, as Mendy said, they approached CASRO. And I know most of you in this room, but for those of you who don't, I also am pretty active in CASRO as it happens. And right before CASRO Digital, we had a meeting of some of the folks, many of whom had been here, some of whom who hadn't, to discuss some of the issues that were brought up at SampleCon. And the topics ranged the gamut. There were issues about, how do we actually ensure that, with so many different sample suppliers, we're talking the same language as clients. How do we actually make it easier for sample to interact with each other so that when you're going to different suppliers and actually bringing things together, you can actually utilize it in a relatively seamless way? How do we actually make things better for the respondent and ultimately for our client? Everything's centered around this. What is data quality? How do we actually ensure that works in a more effective way? So I'm hoping. Oh.
Okay. Keep talking, John.
So, I'm tap dancing a little bit, and we'll see. But we actually made, I think, some progress there. So the idea that we would take what was done here at SampleCon and move it forward actually did. And so one of the last actions that we did at the meeting in Nashville was to sort of organize ourselves into the three major topics that had been discussed during the day. And Nancy Brigham and I, perhaps foolishly, volunteered to be the head of one of the areas. There we are. So we got together and we started talking about sample definitions and demographic protocols, which, one of the most thrilling topics you can ever think of. And so the plan was to continue this momentum that we had And so next, we met up at the, what we called, and I believe this was correct, Peter led this, the CASRO Online Sampling Forum, which was in New York City in May of 2015. And each of the three groups presented some of the big issues. We put some greater thought behind the big issues we had discussed. And we then had discussion. We broke into discussion groups similar to what had been done at SampleCon to try and move things forward. And the establishment of work streams actually came out of that. Now, I have to be brutally honest. the quote here, what we had said with regard to our topic, sample definitions. We had found a lot of contradictory definitions in how we talk, sometimes even within the same company, how we talk versus how clients talk, whether that's full service market research providers or even the end clients. And it was sort of these differences that were really nagging at us. So if you say I have a 5% incidence rate, it means one thing to one person, another thing to another, but everyone thinks that incidence rate is such a clear idea. And I apologize, we keep going back to incidence rate. That's not the only thing we're talking about. But everyone, that's sort of the prototypical one because everyone has such a clear idea of what that means. The problem is my clear idea doesn't necessarily match your clear idea or anybody else's clear idea, but we're using the same terminology. And then we need the demographics to talk to each other. We need to have some form of equality across them. And that doesn't mean that everyone has to use the same thing, but you have to be able to mix sample in these days and have some continuity there. And Nancy actually and I were talking the night before the forum, and we were really like, nobody's going to want to take part in our work stream. We're the ones who find it interesting. Nobody else is going to find it interesting. Well, we were sort of wrong about that. We found that this was actually a problem that a lot of people were tackling, a lot of people were interested in. And we were extremely happy by that. So we actually broke our work stream, the big work stream, into 3 different parts. And today I represent one of the parts, the sample definition part. Oscar represents the second part, which is the demographic protocols part. And Mark Mendy, I don't know if you're still here. He represents the third, which it's sort of appropriate he's outside because we haven't started that. And we decided to put that one to the side because we have so many things we need to do and people are interested in the variety of things. So there is more coming from us. It's not just the 2 things that we're talking about. And then we also have the 2 other major work streams that I think Peter is going to introduce at some point, depending on where he is in the slide selection. Yeah. That we'll talk about. So we broke into the 3 working groups. Here's where we were wrong. We actually had to cap the work stream. We had a lot of people who wanted to be a part of this. And this is critical, and we're going to actually ask you guys for something at the end of this talk. And we wanted to have everybody who could be a part of it, but for functional purposes, we had to cap the work stream. That doesn't mean your voice isn't heard. We'll talk about our plans for this, and everybody's going to have the opportunity to talk about what we're doing and to be a part of this. So I don't want that to be a negative thing. And finally, we were off in July of 2015. And effectively, and I'm going to say we in the big we, I'm going to have a big admittance in just a second. We've been meeting effectively once every 2 weeks since then. I'll show you the plan in a second. This is actually the workstream team. Most people who are here today, so if you could, if you're here, Bonnie, I know Pete's not here, he's over in England. We had to have an international component, although Oscar is fun. Oscar does double duty. He likes committee meetings. Nate, Mark, Peter, Seema, and Elisa sort of formally comprise the meetings. Here's my admittance. I put everyone else in alphabetical order on this list except for Nancy. Nancy wanted to be here today. She had to actually go over to Romania to do her daytime job. She has done, and there have been a few others who have done just an incredible work on this. I am not one of those. Nancy, I have to admit that. Nancy has just put in so much work into this initiative. We wouldn't be where we're at without her organization and her leadership skills. I get to ride her coattails, and she really is the one who deserves to be up here talking to you today about this instead of me. So when you see her at the next conference, thank her for all the incredible work she's done. And I don't want to take away from others. Bonnie has been incredible. The others have been really incredible. I've been the least incredible of all this group on this, so I have to be honest about that. Okay, so this is our actual statement of work. We want to create industry-aligned definitions around terminology used commonly across the market research industry. These definitions will include sample source, sample performance, and sample reporting where appropriate. And we'll talk about how we're actually getting to those things that we're talking about. So those of you who know what APOR has done, APOR has run a similar initiative to the sample definitions work stream. When you're talking either an ABS framework, probability sample, or an RDD, which is not a probability sample, I'm not going to get into that right now, but you will always hear them say, APOR response rate 1 or 2 or 3. They have very clear definitions of those things that we're talking about. And I bring that up because at the end of the day, we don't want to stifle what people are saying. We don't want to say, well, when you say incidence rate, you have to mean this. What we want to say is the common meaning of incidence rate is this. Here are some things else that you might want to tack onto it. But it gives a way of clearly delineating, so everyone's talking the same language when you use the common terminology, what everyone means. Okay, so let's talk about action steps. What have we done? The first thing is there's a lot of stuff that's been out there. This topic has been addressed in different forums, not just SampleCon or other forums. And the thing is, it really hasn't made its way throughout the industry. And so we're concerned about that. But we did actually take the time to review the information that's out there. We defined the scope and parameters of the work. We created initial definitions of terms. And I use the word created. We're actually in the process of creating those definitions. And this is actually critically important. And this is one of the reasons that we're here. We'll be at other conferences to talk about this, but it's critical, and this is where we need all your help, that we align and socialize these definitions across the industry. Because the work stream can put out sort of this is how we want to talk about things, but if nobody ever actually talks about them, nobody sort of accepts that, then you won't actually use them, and therefore we spend a lot of time meeting for no particular reason, if that's the case. So this is where everyone else comes in. We need your help, and I'll actually get to a slide, but I'm previewing that slide. We need your help, and it's talking about what, disagreeing with what we've said with a point of view, talking about this, bringing these definitions into your companies, and really providing, sort of the inertia for those to move around. And then finally, once we've actually socialized, and there will be more socialization, we're all about being social, after the final definitions, but we want to start the socialization process as early as possible because we want people to have a say and actually feel ownership in these definitions. And so we'll be doing that. So where are we at? Well, given everyone has a day job, you may be surprised, but we're running a bit behind our original schedule. Originally, I was going to put up the schedule. We have dates attached to everything, but no. So what we've actually done is we've created the list of items that we feel need to be defined, need to have clear definitions within the industry. We split them up into buckets. We are in the process of developing the initial definitions for one of the buckets. So we'll have other buckets to go after this. We're actually beginning the socialization process for one segment of the definitions in March at CASRO Digital, and that'll be critical. We'll actually have documents to pass out to folks, and so they can actually start to comment on these things. Okay, so our ask of you. For those of you who know me, my dog makes an appearance in almost every presentation I do, and I'm not going to stop now. But the first thing we need is feedback. And again, today I'm talking about the process, talking about what we're doing. The next time you see me or you see Nancy, we'll actually have documentation and documents for you guys to provide feedback for, and that's critical. At the end of the day, people need to have ownership of what we're actually talking about. So, tell us, this looks right, this is completely wrong, or you need to add something here. This is critical to the process. And then finally, socialization. I have no idea who the Rams are, just I don't know where that is, but it looks good. So we'll continue going on there. I do have questions up here, but we do need to get to Oscar, so we'll hold the questions until the end. But I do want to thank you for your time, and woohoo!
Thank you, John. Actually, this is my presentation. If you get Oscar's presentation.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry about that. Switch it around, please. There we go.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. So yeah, of course, we work very similarly in the two different work streams, so we probably have some overlapping here. But see if this works. Ah, okay. I'll talk.
Yeah.
What should we talk about? No, but basically John asked me to join the team, and I think one of the main reasons is just the international aspect, so we're not too US-centric in everything we do. I think at this conference there's like 10 people who's not from the US, and there's one from Chile, one from Austria, yeah. So there's and 2% Brits. So I'm one of those that's not from the US, even though I work here a lot, and I know a lot of you since before. But that's one thing that we're really focusing on this, is not just being stuck at the US, even though we're starting with the US, and we're bringing out those things globally. But I'll talk about that. Now it works. So really the purpose of our part of the work stream is really creating the definitions in between buyers and sellers of sample in terms of demographics. So we have a way to speak about the same thing. We're talking about targeting, but also how does that connect to profiling, which is different from targeting. And the work stream members in my work stream is, I put Brooke up on top there. She's one of the real contributors and solid people in the work stream, delivering a lot of information from the Lucid platform and all the Lucid clients. I'm bringing a lot of knowledge from all the Cint clients, and I think in between the two exchanges, we work with most of the people in the room here. And also we have a lot of people from the industry as well, of course, to help us reach out to all of their partners, their clients, to give feedback to us about what they're doing today, how they're working with profiling and targeting and so on. And yeah, this is some of the partners that we have received feedback from in terms of their exact profiling definitions they have on all the profiling points, which is extremely helpful for us creating the first initial draft and the proposal of how we can define all the profiling. And it's very interesting to see that we have a lot of similarities. Also, we have a lot of differences. So there is a challenge to try to synchronize all of this to one unique format that we all can agree on, and also translate that profiling format to a targeting format that works for buyers as well, talking to all of these suppliers. And suppliers are both panel companies, but also other newer sources as well, which is not really panelized. It's more targeted on the fly as well. So it's slightly different from how we've been working in the past. So that's a challenge for us and a big discussion point that we have. So the scope that we set out really is define the most used profiling or targeting points that we have in the industry, and really taking the scope to the top 10 profiling points. We can't go through all of them because that's way too much. And also looking outside the US but not going in all markets. So we set the scope to the top 10 markets that we all work with in this room. And we have a fairly similar view there as well on how much we do in each and every market. And that's pretty much done already, setting sort of that scope on which profiling points we should focus on and which markets we should focus on. And I talked a bit about profiling versus targeting, which is something that we realized when we started working in this, that we ask questions in different ways, depending if we're a buyer or a seller, and you can't use sort of that targeting question as the profiling questions when you build up a panel. And we started thinking, of course, why and how should we treat this? And really our finding so far is that we need to work with the lowest common denominator to really store the data in the best way so we can convert that into a targeting question. So that's the approach we're taking here. So instead of asking about the age bracket, we're asking the exact day and month and year of birth so we can translate that to the age bracket. And the main purpose then is really communicating between buyer and seller. And that's what we always should have in the back of our minds. And the way we went about to sort of prioritize all this data is that we received a lot of data from all our partners. And basically we set up a huge spreadsheet, taking all these data points and ranking them from 1 to, whatever many data points we have. And with this, we got an overall rank, and that's the way we came up with the top 10 markets and the top 10 data points. And we're happy to share this data later on as well. But that's the way and the method we use to actually define the scope. And here we go, our findings so far. The top 10 profiling points. I'm not sure if there's too much surprise in this or anything that you feel is missing that's very important for you. But this is sort of the common view we see among all the contributors to this. I'm happy to get any feedback from this. If you miss anything, definitely we can take that in. Sweden is not on the list, unfortunately. And then the next step here is really to normalize all of these data points, try to sort of agree on the exact definitions, which is a huge work. We're working on the US right now, and then we'll take this international as well with all the localization, how we define education levels in different countries, etc. And I think John touched upon the deliverables. And currently we're defining the US top 10, and we aim to start the international here in February. And any feedback, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to take any feedback and answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Oscar. All right, good. So first I want to thank the SampleCon board and the conference board for inviting us here. This actually came out of early conversations that Patrick Comer had with CASRO and I had with CASRO, and CASRO's delighted to be here. And this is really in sort of CASRO's charge here to deal with industry standards, so it works very, very well. Also, I encourage them strongly to do it. It's very timely to what's facing the industry. I represent CASRO here as a consultant to CASRO. But it's also involved an effort that CASRO was involved in, the Global Research Business Network, which is sort of like an association of research associations that CASRO is a lead member. I do a lot of work for CASRO out of that. So we had done an SMR GRBN guideline, which dealt with some of these issues, really best practices, and then the collaboration with SampleCon. John covered there was an initial planning session to see if there was interest for a forum meeting. And the forum is actually an organization that CASRO has that's designed to meet continually and indefinitely. So I don't know how long the forum will meet, but I definitely see there's lots of other work to do, and I'd really want to align that closely with what we do here at these conferences. And John, I remember that the first forum meeting was that in Philadelphia?
It was in Philadelphia.
Right.
I took
I was wondering. I said, I was thinking maybe it was in a different city than you were. But anyway, and so we identified these 3 initiatives, right? And so John had covered this. So we'll move on. There's two other initiatives. One is the Participant Engagement Committee that's being led by Lisa Wilding Brown from Innovate and Melanie Courtright from Research Now. And here it's a best practices document that's going to be created that focuses on the best practices in recruitment and engagement and rewards. Right? And then there's a Survey Best Practices Committee that's led by Randall Thomas from GFK and Steve Gittleman at Marketing Inc. And there are two initiatives right now, and there might be more work coming out. One is a survey experience feedback system. You know, many sample providers have some form of this already, where they're rating the experience. And this is, you know, a lot of work's been done, and there's a research on research project going on right now to identify what those key items might be. And the outcome is going to be a limited set of items that could potentially be added to surveys. We'd like to see it picked up the industry, a normative database so that there could be internal comparisons within companies. You could say that client X gets these kinds of scores, you don't. Here are the reasons you want to get the scores that client X gets, because they have better cooperation, higher response rates, et cetera. And this is really ultimately going towards a voice of the participant metric. You know, several people said it, you know, use the term people or use the word participant, which is very important. And then a survey best practices guideline. So I think that it was commented yesterday about, you know, there's a lament that we have about the surveys that we have to do. And I think this is a first step where we might be able to do work to show why survey best practices should be followed. Okay. There is another meeting of the forum on March 31st in Austin after CASRO Digital. We're going to present the work products. Each three groups are going to present a work product from these three initiatives. We're going to work to identify next steps and additional initiatives. One of the things I'm thinking about is, you know, discussion of the future of quality, because everything we do is really in the context of a sample, where techniques from probability samples have been migrated to, you know, these non-probability, mostly quota samples that we use. There's a lot of discussing here about ad effectiveness. And I think there's a need for quality in that area. I think data is going to become very important. And that's more the kind of things that drives quality in web analytics, data analytics, those sorts of things. So if you want more information, you want to attend, it's an invitation-based thing, but we'd like everybody to attend. This is just more about scoping the kind of venue that you want. And sort of my role, too, is that I cajole these good people to come on and do this, and all the people that are participating as well. And I think the participation is great. So we'd love to see you at that event, and particularly would like to get your input and your questions. So we've got some time for questions here. Any questions?
So I noticed in the list of qualifications and countries that ethnicity was there, which is obviously something in the U.S. we care a lot about from a research perspective. How are we handling ethnicity and other sensitive topics for other markets that are, where that may not be appropriate, as it were?
Yeah, exactly. That's especially one of the questions or profiling points which will be localized, where it's not even legal to really ask that in certain countries. So we'll take that on a country-by-country basis if we include ethnicity or not, or if we have different questions or different ways to ask that.
Yeah. One of the important things is they will also provide guidance on where it is appropriate to ask ethnicity and where not to.
Yeah, that's a great question, and John's point, I think, is an industry opportunity to identify where you can't ask those things, because people always ask. You know, I mean, I do a lot of this stuff, and I come across people who have perceptions that, you know, you can't, that a child is, you know, 15 or younger in Europe, and that's clearly not the case, even though it's going to be relying with the new the regulations. That's another side benefit. Next question.
How do you plan to address the breakdown of the gender dichotomy into different identifications of male, female, and then what about other? How are we going to handle that? Yeah, like that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We had discussions around that as well. And of course, nothing is decided, of course, but we're sort of focusing on where is the requirements coming from the buying side and the targeting side. So that is primarily the focus on this, even though we're sort of giving some guidance on the profiling side that, of course, you want to include everyone in this. So yeah, that's the answer I can give.
I think I would add there that that's an opportunity for input. I think that in some markets, Sweden, for example, there would probably be much more interest in the other category than it is in some other countries which are much more conservative. But again, I mean, the good thing about this is that we're being these profiling points, these breaks are being presented from the buyers of sample, right? And this is an opportunity to align. So in particular, I mean, it was alluded to, but there's a big benefit if everybody's using the same definition for incidence rate. It permits the people, that everybody partners with somebody. There's different groups of companies that partner and work together, and so everybody's talking the same language. All right. No? Okay,
Well,
thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
woohoo!